Episode 40, The Horror Lane. Taking on roads less traveled at night can be a dangerous and arduous task, especially after a long drive throughout the day. These windy routes could also be a constant safety threat with their lack of street lamps and the occasional random potholes that could knock any cars out of their alignment and cause the driver to lose control of his vehicle. However, a particular road, a specific lane to be exact, had been the reason for many accidents over the years whenever vehicles would pass by, especially in the nighttime. Accidents along the narrow lane would cause serious injuries, and sometimes the accidents even led to fatal outcomes. Some of those who survived the accident and lived to tell the tale shared that they would see a figure or two appear in the middle of the road before they eventually swerved uncontrollably and drove into the tree trunks on the sides. Even though word got around about how haunted the lane was, there were still drivers who were willing to take the risk of driving past at night, thinking that it would never happen to them. When a couple of paranormal investigators, Irwin and Claude, eventually heard about the place, they decided to pack up and drive over. With quite a large audience following, they wanted to not only find solid evidence to show their viewers, but they also intended to help resolve the supernatural matter as they had done plenty of times before. And upon further research and knowing that there was no accommodation nearby, they were prepared to pitch a tent overnight at the side of the road. So, after driving for about 7 hours away from the city, they eventually arrived at the start of the dreaded lane. It was in the afternoon, and Irwin and Claude saw that the road was narrow and had only one lane for either way of the traffic, while the roadsides were merely a grass patch in front of a forested area. Street lamps were also far apart from one another, and the pair knew that once the sun fully sets, only spots of the long, narrow road would be lit. The pair then parked their car on the grass patch right by the road, underneath one of the street lamps, and began setting up a small campsite for their rest and equipment area. They also took out their trusty foldable bicycle in case they needed to ride it to the washroom, which was further up for a couple of miles, located within a 24-hour convenience store. So the night eventually came, and they were all geared up to capture video and audio footage of what they have heard so much about, but have yet to experience it themselves. As the night began, they also noticed that the cars passing through got lesser and lesser. Eventually, before it even reached 8 p.m., there were almost no cars that passed by. It was as though most drivers understood that the lane had a mutually understood cutoff time, that a pass-through of a later time would put their lives at risk. However, every half hour or so, there would still be a couple of brave vehicles that passed by. But as Irwin and Claude watched each car pass, they didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. Their audio recording also caught no odd sounds as the cars passed through. The pair stayed undeterred, as they have always been. As they sat by the roadside while listening to their audio and continued taking video of the location. As it was almost midnight, Irwin wanted to go for a quick washroom break. So he took the bicycle and rode along the path. As he was riding the bicycle, Irwin was slightly worried that he would pass by a supernatural figure, not because he was unsure of what to do, but as he didn't have his camera to capture the footage. But after 15 minutes of riding the bicycle, he eventually arrived at the convenience store without any supernatural incidents. Irwin used the washroom, purchased some late-night snacks, and rode the bicycle back to where Claude was waiting for him. Just as Irwin was only about 200 yards away from Claude, he saw something odd that got him excited. From a distance, Irwin saw what seemed like a child on a tricycle sitting right next to Claude, while Claude seemed to not have noticed the boy and was busy looking into his video recording device instead. So Irwin pedaled as fast as he could toward Claude and tried to call out for him. However, before Irwin could reach Claude, a lady figure slowly creeped up from the bushes at the side and then onto the edge of the road. The lady then stopped about 10 yards in front of Irwin, turned to him, and stood still as though trying to block him from getting close to Claude. Irwin stopped his bicycle, as he immediately knew that this lady too was a supernatural figure, and could feel that she had evil intentions, seeing how she wasn't allowing Irwin to approach Claude. Irwin also felt that with the many surprises that he had from supernatural experiences, this particular confrontation struck a tingling sense of fear in him. The lady continued looking at Irwin, and as Irwin tried to ignore it and looked behind the lady to get Claude's attention, Irwin saw that Claude hadn't noticed him and was intensely looking into their video recording device, working hard to hopefully capture interesting footage while Irwin was away. Irwin then saw the boy on the tricycle, who was right beside Claude, turn his head to look at Irwin and smiled from afar. Seeing the situation that they were in, Irwin immediately knew that the two figures did not make themselves visible to Claude, and that the haunting was directed only to Irwin. Irwin tried to ignore the lady and the little boy and continued shouting at Claude to get his attention, but somehow Irwin could see that Claude still couldn't hear him. Instead, Irwin saw Claude having trouble with the video recorder as he was looking at the sides of the device, seemingly trying to solve a functional problem. Irwin knew that the problem that Claude was facing wasn't a new one, as it was a problem they would always face with their recording devices if the energy levels from the supernatural became intense. Just when Irwin refocused his gaze towards the lady in front of him, Irwin noticed that the lady was inching closer towards him. In his countless experiences with the supernatural, this was the first time that Irwin saw a spirit coming close to him. In all his past encounters, the spirits would either hide in the distance or give a quick glance of themselves before disappearing again. As the spirit continued to come closer, Irwin froze momentarily as fear finally struck him. Feeling that he might get physically harmed, Irwin then turned his bicycle as he attempted to cycle away from the spirit. That was when Irwin suddenly heard a loud dragging sound of the car horn and saw a flash before him. Without having the time to react or feel anything, the only thing he saw next was the blur sight of a car passing by, and then him lying on the road floor. Irwin then saw a couple of pair of legs running towards him before he lost consciousness. When Irwin woke up, he found himself at a small hospital and saw Claude in the distance talking to a doctor. When Claude saw that Irwin had regained his consciousness, both him and the doctor rushed over to check on Irwin. Irwin was confused at what had happened to him and was wondering where he was at exactly. Claude told Irwin that he was hit by an oncoming car and lost consciousness immediately after. Claude then called for the ambulance, and they rushed him to the nearest hospital as Claude packed up all their equipment at the site and drove to the hospital shortly after. After which, Irwin told Claude about what he had seen and that he was continuously shouting at Claude the entire time. But the odd thing Claude said was that he never saw or heard Irwin. And with how silent the road was, it was extremely odd that Claude couldn't hear him. Irwin also mentioned that it was just so weird that Claude didn't see the blinkers from Irwin's bicycle. That was when they realized how the accident happened, not only for Irwin, but also for the countless other vehicles that met a road accident in the past. They knew that these were evil spirits that they were dealing with, as the spirits intended to harm passers-by. by appearing in the form of a lady and a boy to shock drivers into an accident. The pair knew that when such spirits are out with ill intent to harm others, it is always due to the fact that they don't want people being there, in their territory. And as they were reasoning out the details of the reasons for the supernatural hauntings, that was when the hospital doctor told them that Irwin wasn't the first one to have seen such supernatural figures at the lane. The doctor explained that the figures actually represented a mom and her son, who was killed as they attempted to cross the road several years ago. The evil spirits of the area probably mocked the physique of the mother and her little boy, and used it to set fear into the road users there. The doctor then warned Irwin and Claude to stay away from that lane at night, and no horror adventure would be worth the pain. Irwin was discharged from the hospital a couple of days later, as he had almost fully recovered. Once they were ready, instead of sharing video footage from their trip to the horror lane with their audience, Irwin and Claude appeared in front of a camera and shared what they had experienced on that fateful night. It was a night that Irwin continued to have nightmares about, seeing how he was haunted by not one, but two evil spirits who forced their way into ensuring that Irwin was scared, harmed, and never returned to that very spot. To the spot that Irwin will always remember as the horror lane.